My name is John Ilsley, and I've been lucky enough to spend most of my life making music. Throughout my career, I've been fortunate to play with some great guitar players, and I've always been struck by the relationship between the guitar and the guitarist. Now I've decided to explore this connection by asking one of the truly great players to choose 6 pivotal instruments that have defined his sound and radically influenced his music. So I'm putting the what down from the top? 1, 2, 3, and...
I think I fell in love with the guitar when I was about 14. It's probably the most played instrument in the world, and it's a beautiful thing to be involved in. I became a bass player because the band that I joined at school said we don't want any more guitar players. Suddenly the bass became my principal instrument, and that got me into all sorts of trouble and ended up starting a band called Dire Straits. The rest is history.
This is me, with a slightly dodgy t-shirt, sharing the stage with a true guitar legend. Mark Knopfler is recognised as a guitar virtuoso, ranked by Rolling Stone magazine as one of the greatest players of all time. As a member of Dire Straits and as a solo artist, he has sold over 120 million records worldwide and has won 4 Grammy Awards. From his lifetime of playing guitars and a musical career that has spanned 3 decades, I've asked Mark to choose 6 guitars that define his life and sound.
And these are Mark Knopfler's guitar stories.
Mark and I met in this council flat in Deptford, which I was sharing with David, his brother. And I'd been out misbehaving myself one evening, and I came back about 8 o'clock in the morning to find Mark lying on the floor fast asleep with a guitar sort of lying across him, and this would be a very familiar sight from then on. I think this journey that we're going to go on with Mark, you know, I'm going to learn something out of this because, you know, sometimes a lot of these things are quite secretive. They're not things that he would normally share. So I'm going to be asking him questions which probably hasn't been asked before. And I think I'm in the wrong lane. I'm on my way to see Mark in his childhood home of Newcastle, which is where we've arranged to meet and find out what he's chosen as his first guitar. Okay, well, here we are in beautiful Newcastle.
There he is.
Oh, here he is. Hello, mate.
Here we are.
How are you?
Good to see you, pal. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Well, this is the spot.
This is where the journey begins.
Yeah.
As a teenager in the early 60s, Mark grew up listening to rock and roll and making the weekend pilgrimage to Newcastle's preeminent music shop, J.G. Windows, in the city's central arcade.
On Saturdays, this is where I used to come and do the rounds of the music shops, and I know that there's kids that still do that on a Saturday.
Yeah, well, I think
meet you down the music shop, you know.
Drool at the window.
Drooling. Look at that.
A red strap.
Look at
whole
that. It's
thing
a
to the
signature.
window.
Look. Wow.
Looks good in there.
But I remember the first time I saw one of these in a shop, be around 1960, I guess, or 61, 62 when the first one
first started coming over.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks to Hank Marvin and...
Right. On the way to school and on the way back, I used to just stare at it. I keep thinking about how many hours I must have spent looking in shop windows of guitar. I still do it. We'll still cross the road to look now.
It's a habit you'll never break.
No, never will.
But back then, Mark couldn't afford any of the guitars in the windows. Sadly, his first guitar wasn't going to be a Fender Stratocaster.
Yeah, this is fantastic now, isn't it?
A few more than when you were in here last, I should think, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Plenty more.
So what have we got in the case then?
Well, this is my first guitar. This is the one my poor old dad, when I was 15, is as close as he could get to a real Fender Stratocaster. And these are called a Hofner Super Solid.
What were they made of? I mean, is this wood or is it sort of plywood?
Oh, it's still wood. Yeah,
it's still wood, is it?
That's wood, yeah. And they've still copied that.
Oh, yeah, that little stratty thing there.
Yeah, and with the very distinctive tremolo arm, the sort of contoured for the hand. I absolutely love this thing, even though, of course, it wasn't the real object of desire.
Well, there's one over here we can compare it with. Let's just have a look at this.
Yeah, there's
Here we are.
the real,
Here's the latest.
the real McCoy.
They're almost identical. Look at that.
Well, I think to the untrained eye, John,
You ended up with that one instead.
Yeah, there was an old guy in the shop there. His head used to go around, like his chin was always moving, and I still remember him saying, "Stick at it," as I walked out the shop.
Well, you said stick at it. Or he did.
He told me to stick at it.
Not to keep doing that, but...
You'll never make it.
And hopefully it stays in tune.
Well, hopefully it does.
Yeah.
It's actually in tune. Not too bad.
Yeah.
That's the first chord that you learn as an E minor there. And it just makes that lovely, mysterious, rocking noise. I never remember getting a lesson at all. But I would obviously be using the wrong fingers. I would probably use my first two fingers. And I remember shaking all over. And then learning to damp, because I couldn't afford an amp, I didn't have the nerve to ask poor old Dad for an amp.
What did you use then?
I blew up the family radio in fairly short order, yeah. You would get a little coaxial and
I remember
stick it
that.
up, and then a red and a black, and stick it in the back of the radio. You'd have 1.5 watts of pulsating power,
That's it.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty good though, for a first guitar. The one I had was a Rossetti Lucky 7. Do you remember those?
Oh, please. Just because it was nowhere near a Strat doesn't alter the fact that you love your
No, I think
first guitar.
it's kind of important you kept it,
I remember not wanting to let go of it the day I got it, so it's possible that I slept with it. It could be. It was certainly by the side, by my
Well, it's
side.
kind of the right shape. It's got that female shape, so it's close, isn't it? Yeah.
So Mark's first choice of guitar is his Hofner Super Solid V2, a Stratocaster replica with a black anodized metal scratch blade and tremolo arm. Bought for 50 quid by Mark's dad in 1964.
So we've just had a look at Mark's first guitar, which, to be honest, I'd never seen before. So he's kept that one well hidden. And it was good to get back to where he first began his musical interest, I think, and the first guitar that his dad bought him. And in those days, 50 quid was quite a lot of money on the guitar. If you consider the average weekly wage was probably, 30 or 20 pounds. So it was a couple of weeks' wages. And I think it sounded pretty good for a first guitar.
Armed with his first guitar, Mark left his childhood home in 1967 and after a brief period in Essex headed for Leeds in 1968. Despite a string of school bands, musical success had proved elusive. So after leaving university, he turned to journalism and began his career as a junior reporter at the Yorkshire Evening Post. While working for the newspaper, he'd meet a man who would profoundly influence his style of playing and introduce him to his next guitar.
Mark, where are we going today?
Well, we're heading off to the home of Steve Phillips, my old pal from Leeds, to the Grosvenor pub where Steve plays a regular gig.
I'm just interested to know how you started working with Steve.
I was a cub reporter on the Evening Post in Leeds, and of course one of the first things that I've had to find in Leeds was a blues club, being such a blues fanatic at the time. And Steve was there.
Well, he was playing.
Steve was playing a national, and I think that was the first time I actually saw a national for real. I must have seen pictures, and in fact that's the national that I came to own myself later on. Boy, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Incredible?
We both said that at the same time. Look at that.
We had come to the sleepy seaside town of Robin Hood's Bay to see the iconic guitar made so famous by the cover of Dire Straits' fifth album, Brothers in Arms. Mark and I had arrived in Robin Hood's Bay, the unlikely home of one of Britain's greatest living blues musicians, the man who would introduce Mark to his next guitar.
Hey.
Well, hey. How you doing, bud?
Good to see you.
Yeah, good.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right.
You're looking well.
I don't know why.
Giving up the smokes.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where you do your thing, isn't it?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, what a lovely place.
Yeah, I know.
There's no eccentrics up this way, are there?
It is actually full of eccentrics. I'm hardly noticeable.
You feel at home here. When did you guys meet? What sort of year?
I think it's 1969.
Yeah.
In
And I saw you
England,
play at a blues club.
That's right, yeah.
And Steve was playing this national.
That one?
Yeah. You know, you just didn't see them around, so that's the first one that the first time I actually saw one.
Yeah.
So nobody else was playing these like this?
Not
at
many
that time?
people, no. They're quite still probably under people's beds and in people's, you know, guys who played them before the war, you know, because basically the electric guitar put this out and made this redundant, because this was the first attempt to make a
loud guitar.
Make a louder guitar, you know, so if you played it in a dance band you could be heard. A flat top guitar doesn't really have that punch in the middle, so it's
a sort of a vulgar sound, if you know. And actually, with vulgar appointments, you know, the thing is, I mean, here you've got the lovers in their canoe. It's all done in the worst possible taste.
They're almost the same, aren't they?
Yeah. The first national that I got was I saw it in Exchange in March, and it was in Wales. I didn't have any money and I didn't have a car. So I borrowed the car, I borrowed the money, and I drove to Wales in the pouring rain and got this guitar from an old orchestral musician. And later on I got the chance to buy this from Steve, because Steve was ascending the social scale with his nationals, and he'd got a top-of-the-line thing called a National Don. So he sold me this one, and this has been my pal ever since.
So then you guys started playing together as the Duolian String Pickers. So what kind of music were you playing then?
I was really deep into the Chicago blues at that point, but Steve was into the 20s and 30s music. And so Steve's house became a kind of university of the blues for me, because he had a tremendous record collection, really obscure stuff. We'd play things like Can't Be Satisfied. It would be something like and you never really forget too much.
So the love affair with the National then stimulated you to start writing things on it, and one of the most poignant ones, of course, is the Romeo and Juliet lick, which came out of, if I remember rightly, a tuning thing.
Yeah, a lot of the songs that we learned on these, the guitar would be tuned not the normal way, but to an open chord. So we've just tuned ours to. Because you have to learn new chords to try and play tunes around with the open tuning, that then becomes your 4 chord, and this shape here is your 5 chord. And of course, as you move on, then you can start to take liberties with that. You know, work out your own little bits of improvisation, make it your own a little bit.
Okay.
And then the lick came.
And of course, and everybody's dying to know how to play it.
Struck Romeo, sing the streets of
So Mark's second choice of guitar was a 1937 National Style O, bought from Steve Phillips in 1978.
the streetlight, steps out of the shade, says something like, you and me, babe.
What you've witnessed today is something which just happens totally naturally when they get together, and it's just like they just played it yesterday. It's really lovely just to see that mutual respect, and I think that's rather beautiful, actually. There's something really lovely about all that.
It's more than 40 years since we played.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, you're looking good, Steve.
Am I? I won't stop drinking then.
As the Duolian String Pickers, Mark and Steve toured the local pubs and clubs in the late 60s. And today Steve has invited Mark to join him on stage once again.
Right, put your hands together for Mark Knopfler, please. Special guest tonight. This is one of the first tunes me and Mark used to play together back in the late 1960s.
I think we last played this when we had air.
Not too fast.
Oh, please. Not too fast, you say.
Well, that was fun last night at the Grosvenor, wasn't it? Steve?
You know, I could sense a major lock-in looming.
It was interesting because those songs that you two decided to play together, there were sort of little elements of there which definitely have drifted into the, you know, the Straits music over the years.
I think it did.
It's great, to, you know.
I think that's dead right.
You know, like on things like Southbound.
Yeah,
sort
the
of
pick
that
up the downbeat on the thumb, I think. Yeah.
You know, there's all
right.
that sort of feel, sort of journey, that Southbound journey.
In 1973, Mark decided to dedicate himself to music full-time. So he left the north and headed south to London.
A lot of those songs that seemed to me on the first record were all about, you know, that transition.
I was just trying to put my own geography into it and not be Route 66. Because it's not Route 66.
No, it's the A19.
It's the A19 and
Doesn't have the same ring to it.
Mark and I are heading to North London to the very beginning of Dire Straits' recording career and to discover Mark's next guitar.
Well, we're headed to Pathway Studios. I suppose you could say where it all began.
This is where we did the first recording, isn't it? This little 8-track studio.
I had to do a deal with the rest of the band, you remember, because I got some money from my grandma.
250 quid, I think it was.
That's
John,
right.
you had
We had an agreement that if we actually made any money out of this, I'd get paid back. So,
So I owe you a tenner?
No, you paid it back all right.
During its many years as a recording studio, Pathway captured the sounds of Madness, Elvis Costello, Squeeze and the Police. It's now been converted back into residential accommodation, but its new owners have continued its musical heritage and rock and roll ethos.
Wow, it's still a studio, though. No.
What did you do with all this lot?
Back then, we'd recently formed Dire Straits and were rehearsing in our tiny flat in Deptford and gigging in and around London.
We used to load in and out of places like the Hope and Anchor in Islington.
We did one outside the flat in Deptford, and we did maybe a couple at the Albany before the National Front burnt it down. Do you remember that?
But the arrival of Mark's next guitar was to play a crucial role in shaping the band's sound.
I was trying to remember the original version of Sultans that you played. It was kind of like almost a sort of slightly country, sort of folky sort of thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, originally the song, I was playing it on open tuning on an acoustic guitar, and I've forgotten what the tune was. And it was only until the Strat turned up, which is this one from 1961. Here she is. It was the nature of the sound that made me change the music all around.
Yeah.
One of the things that the Strat gave me was that movement and moving the note around, and then 2 strings. But then I found, maybe it's to do with being left-handed, I used to be able to move 3 strings with 1 finger. Like, I think that the Sultans would be moving. That was part of the sound, and I remember realizing that the thing was giving me a different set of music to the same set of lyrics.
The Straits sound to me is very much this thumb on the bottom, which gives a lead to the bass player, me, and to the drummer with his bass drum. So you get this sort of bounce off the music.
Yeah, the playing had really just developed from using a piece of plastic to finger picking, and through my background and not being able to afford an amplifier. The right hand is making a sound like this a lot of the time. That becomes a feature. So even if you're just going, it has the same thump thing to it. With Sultans, it would be that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would always put another rhythm in.
We've got a piece of modern technology here, which of course didn't exist then, which we've got the original demo of Sultans on. So
Which I haven't heard for 35 years.
I listened to it the other day. It's very simple, actually. So do you think you can play along with this?
Yeah, I bet you I could.
Ah, there we go.
Get a shiver in the dark, it's raining.
So Mark's third guitar is the iconic Fender Stratocaster, the very same model he gazed at in northern music shops all those years ago.
A band is blowing Dixie.
The demo tape of Songs of Swing was about to give us our big break when we took it to Radio London DJ Charlie Gillett.
Charlie played it on the radio, and we weren't even listening to the program that week because we were moving furniture for somebody.
We were shifting furniture. And then we went to the pub that night, and somebody said, we heard you on the radio. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do remember.
The Oxford Arms.
I mean, it's amazing how many people listen to that program.
Yeah, and we missed it.
Yeah. And I can't even remember whose furniture we were helping to move.
You know. One of
Can
your
you?
One of your girlfriends, I think.
Now get out of here.
Well, we didn't have girlfriends in those days.
No, of course we didn't.
Couldn't afford them.
But luckily, that did change. And after the release of the first album, we were playing Sultans of Swing on the television and to packed concert halls around Europe. The next few years would take us from that Deptford flat and into the international limelight, with our first album making the top 10 in every European country in a sell-out tour across America. By 1982, we'd released 4 top-selling albums, but there was still more to come.
Songs come from all sorts of directions and all sorts of reasons. And it couldn't just be a portrait of a character. Money for Nothing was actually in New York, and I was in a kitchen appliance store. There was a whole wall of TVs at the back of the store, and they were all tuned to MTV. And there was some meathead guy who worked there, and he was sounding off about these people on the videos, the musicians on the videos. What the guy was coming out with was so classic. So I just hid behind some microwaves and started writing down the lines that this guy would say, you know, what's that, Hawaiian noises, and, you know, maybe get a blister on your little finger. Yeah. And that ain't working, which was his position. Yeah, that ain't working, yeah. Little did he know.
The music video for Money for Nothing from our 5th album, Brothers in Arms, was the first promo to be played on MTV when it launched in the UK in 1987. For the previous Straits albums, Mark had predominantly used the Fender, but to perfect that iconic lick, Mark had turned to a new guitar.
This is the Les Paul. It's a very distinctive sound, which, if my memory serves me correctly, was sort of almost got by accident.
Obviously, you know, I had my Marshall there. We turned it up to as far as it would go, and we were going for a pretty heavy sound, but I had a wah-wah pedal in it just to give it something different, and so we got the pedal, and as soon as it was in and set, that was the sound.
Yeah, yeah.
You just, instead of it going whack, 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 and moving it with your foot, I just set it into a certain place, so it's probably just slicing through a very small little nasal.
So it's like a phasing thing, isn't it? Almost?
Yeah, it's just
and it gives it that really sort of unique sound.
You're sort of waltzing around sometimes with these. And this lick, just again, it came from just the way that I play. I'm actually just playing a couple of strings at a time, but I'm damping out everything else. And if you stick some notes into it, it really just comes from that.
For me, that's what's always been very interesting, you know, all the years that you and I worked together, is the fact that, you know, you're trying different things all the time, you know, and this was another kind of move, and you've always experimented. You haven't just stuck with one thing, become known for one thing, you know what I mean? It's like there's a whole history of trying out different ideas.
Yeah,
and
you
different
try
guitars.
things out. People say, how did you get the sound on so-and-so? And
Yeah.
usually I say, well, I can't remember. I plugged it in to an amp and messed around until I
Yeah.
got something that worked. And a lot of the stuff that's come my way over the years is just the reason that you've got more than a few instruments is
Yeah.
that they're just things you brought in and you used them and you needed them, and or
Because you never
something-
got rid of them. You've
you
got
just,
you
yeah,
end
you
up with a
never got
collection.
rid of them. So you actually become a collector. You're not. People think you're a collector, but you actually become a collector by default. Really.
Yeah.
I never stop appreciating the thing. Every time I pick it up, I think, especially if you've been playing other instruments and you get back to your to a guitar like this. You know, I always. And sometimes I'll just give it a kiss, you know.
I mean, just to get on to Brothers for a minute, why did we choose this, or why did you choose this? Did we try them? Did we try
No,
them?
I never did. I always
Just went
knew
straight
that
for that.
that's what I wanted, was a Paul.
Yeah, yeah.
When we were in the studio,
Yeah.
I didn't know how I was going to start. I'd written the thing, I'd written all the words and knew what the chords were. But those first notes, they'd be improvised, you know, it could be anything. Just with those, 1, 2, 3, 4, or... And then something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't really know in the studio. I must have been trying different things and ended up with those notes to get the thing started.
There's so many different worlds.
So guitar number 4 is the Gibson Les Paul, used not only on Money for Nothing, but the title track of Dire Straits' most successful album, Brothers in Arms.
You did not desert me, my brothers in arms.
Brothers in Arms has sold over 30 million copies over the years and launched a world tour in 1985. It was during this tour that Mark saw the need for a new kind of guitar, but to find it, you need to travel all the way to the United States of America. Mark and I are heading into Soho, New York, to the legendary guitar shop of one Rudy Pensar.
My great friend Rudy, he came over from Argentina and started working in a music shop on 48th Street, and eventually managed to secure a little hole in the wall for a shop for himself. It was a tiny little place when I met Rudy, but he's done very well over the years.
Well, I've never been there before, so this is going to be a real treat for
Well, I
me.
think it will be a treat for you. It's going to be the most beautiful guitar shop in the world. I'm pretty sure that you'll agree when you see it. Here we are, my friend.
Wow.
It's sort of like a celebration, if you like. A celebration of the guitar for every reason that you can think of, you know. Let's go inside.
Let's have a look inside.
Hope Rudy's there.
Rudy, oh, look at this. Oh, my God.
Rudy!
Rudy! Hey!
Very good, Rudy.
Hello, man.
Good to see you, pal. How are you?
Long
Very nice to see you. Long time to see this guy,
See you, man.
Rudy has owned a guitar shop in New York since 1977, and over the years his passion for guitars has earned him a reputation of being one of the best in the business.
So, Rudy, how long have you been collecting? I mean, is this all your life?
Yeah, all my life. Basically, when I got into instruments, guitars, my first band in Argentina, I was 10 years old, and I was trying to get some pieces there, and but intensely, I got more involved when I came to America because it's more guitars. But it's the love of my life since I'm 7.
Mark has been a customer of Rudy's for years, but when he came to Rudy in 1987, he wasn't looking for an old guitar off the shelf.
Okay, so the reason why we're here, Rudy, is because this is the 5th guitar in the series, of Mark's guitar series. And this is the Pensar, which of course is named after you, Rudy Pensar.
Absolutely,
If we could
right.
go upstairs and have a look at some of these Pensars. Brilliant.
You've
Let's
still
go do
got
that
some
now.
for sale, Rudy. I can't believe it.
More than one or two. More than one or two.
Sound of the Pensar.
Yeah, man.
Okay, so we're here to hear the story of how you two guys, got together in a cafe and decided that you wanted to make a guitar which essentially Mark could use on stage that sounded like a Strat and then sounded like a Gibson as well. So this is where this came about.
The whole idea, John, really was to, you know, it was when we were playing, I don't know whether you remember, but well, it was just getting into too many guitar changes.
Yeah,
and
I do remember the
you
guitar
wanted to
changes.
have something that I could just get a wider range of sounds from.
I remember listening to Mark saying, I like the shape of the Strat, but some things about a Gibson guitar that attracts me. And we used to go to this coffee shop all the time, and we started with a little napkin from a place, remember, it's longer gone.
Yeah, it was a place called Fritzl's. It was
Fritzl's.
just up from the store, and we used to go and get a cup of coffee there. Yeah.
But I like the idea. I like the challenge to design it, and then we make it, and they become, you know, the MK1.
And you know, it would be used on things like I call an Elvis.
So this is the finished article, but what I'm interested in actually is having a look at, you know, the basic sort of raw, you know, the actual sort of gubbins.
Well, basically, you know, this is the first stage of the guitar. Later on, it goes applied to a beautiful piece of mahogany.
Yeah.
To attach these two pieces of wood after this glue, it's a beautiful touch to do a banding all around. The marriage between the two woods, this seals the marriage. And then this is basically, if you think about a piano as a fingerboard, the keyboard, this is one of the most important pieces of the guitar playing, because here is where he's going to play and have the sustain and bending and everything. You're going to be able to bend very high. See, look, he can
on
bend.
these you can't,
Yeah,
Wow.
and the note never dies.
You know, you can really appreciate it, something like this, where there's been no compromise, where every fret has been put in very carefully. Every little thing that's been drilled has been drilled absolutely precision straight. So you're talking about degrees of...
You're talking about the Rolls Royce, aren't
Tiny,
you?
well, Ferrari. I think it's a better word for this, isn't it?
So guitar number 5 is the Pensa Mark I, designed on a napkin, but destined to become an icon. The Pensa featured on Dire Straits' 6th and final album, On Every Street, and became the first in a line of exquisite custom-built guitars and basses. But despite the extraordinary craftsmanship of these guitars, we were surrounded by instruments of perhaps even greater beauty. Masterworks Rudy had collected, and in particular the work of one unrivaled guitar maker and his masterpiece, the Radio City Archtop, inspired by the iconic New York Theatre.
I saw that guitar across the street from me, and this called my attention. And I ran across the street, and I said to the guy, "Who made this guitar?" He said, "Oh, he is the Stradivarius of the guitar."
Mr. Signor Monteleone.
John Monteleone is the latest and perhaps the last in a line of master New York guitar makers, and tomorrow we'll be seeing the birthplace of these instruments.
When did you first meet John?
Well,
was it through Rudy, or was
Yes, it was through Rudy. Rudy put a Radio City guitar into my hands, and I gave it straight back to him and I said, I am not worthy of this thing. I mean, this is the most beautiful thing. It's got to be the most beautiful archtop in the world. Right up at such a level that really, you almost ask yourself, where does sanity end and something else take over?
Well, this is the final leg of our journey. We're crossing the river away from the city, and we're on our way to John Monteleone's on Long Island. After 2 decades, 6 albums, and a final 300-show tour, it was time to call it a day. And Dire Straits ended in 1993. But Mark's love of guitars and music did not, and he began a solo career. While his choice of guitars had always had a profound influence on his arrangements, now the unique maker of Mark's 6th guitar would become the subject of one of his songs.
There's a tradition of great violin makers in Italy, Stradivarius and Guarneri and Amato and the Cremona in Italy, and there's a tradition of making these F-hole guitars in New York City by Italians, and it's sort of a strange parallel, D'Angelico and Cristo, and now a man called John Monteleone.
I've only been out to John's once before, and it was a little bit like meeting a true Stradivari or something I've just met.
A genius.
And John is very unassuming, a very modest man, but he is like that.
Oh, there he is, the man himself.
Look who's here. It's been too long. It's been too long.
It's been great to
Oh my
see
God.
you.
So
How
good
are
to
you?
see you.
Very good to see you
All
too,
right,
man.
yeah. Come on in.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Well, it's wonderful being back.
Wow.
In we go.
Oh, you look like you've just started something here, John, is that right?
Yeah, I got into a project in anticipation of you guys today showing up, so I started making what you see is a pile of sawdust, the appropriate thing to have.
From his workshop, John Monteleone makes each of his guitars by hand, crafting logs of wood into musical works of art.
This was one piece of wood before it was sawed down the middle and cut in half. You know, so now I can saw it open and cut it and join it in the middle. That makes it wide enough to be that back. But at this stage already, it has some resonance and pitch to it, and that's where the real magic comes into the sound or the possible potential sound of any instrument. And in Mark's case, I pulled out a bunch of pieces for him to look at, and then I was tapping those pieces to kind of assess, yeah, that's the one. I want to kind of identify what it is that the purpose is going to be for that instrument. What is it going to be used for? What do you want to do with it? So we would talk about that. We would have those conversations.
Which presumably is going to make every guitar sound different than what you make.
They will be different. They may have similar character, but they'll have different personality.
John agreed to show us one of his newly finished archtop guitars from his Four Seasons collection.
This was Spring.
Oof. Holy come on, look at this state of this thing. I mean, honestly.
That's beautiful. It's...
Oh, I mean,
Thank you.
this is something else, isn't it? Just something else. I'm not worthy, John.
Well, no, yes, you are. You can do it.
For the uninitiated,
Yeah.
the difference between an archtop and a flat top, based very simply.
Well, the simple explanation is that a flat top has a fixed bridge. This is the bridge area here. And a flat top will have pins that anchor the strings to that anchor point. An arch top, the strings are allowed to stretch over and attach to a tailpiece, forcing the bridge downward, whereas the pin bridge came over and was anchored by bridge pins in the top.
So that bridge is not fixed?
That is not
It's
a
just-
fixed bridge. It's
Right.
able to move.
Okay, wow.
So it's just held down really by the strings, John, yeah.
There's kind of another interesting aspect to this whole story is the fact that Mark actually wrote a song about this, and wrote a song about you, in fact, actually, in relation to the guitar. And in fact, I think you were actually building the guitar while Mark was writing the song or recording it. Were you recording it at the time?
Well, as John was building the guitar, he'd send me the occasional email. And, you know, and he did, with those little pictures of the build as it was going on. And he would always end his emails with a little sign-off saying, well, the chisels are calling, you know, or it's time to make sawdust, you know. And they very charming little sign-offs, and they became lines for the song. And so, you know, it would be something like... because the chisels are calling. It's time to make sawdust. So it actually became those little lines, you know, and then there's steely reminders of things left to do. Monteleone, the mandolin's waiting for you. Chisels are calling. It's time to make sawdust. Steely reminders things left to do. Monteleone, a mandolin's waiting for you.
When I first heard the Monteleone song, I was taken by surprise, really. I'd gone to London, and I couldn't wait to hear it. His studio is so gorgeous and beautiful. And he sat me down in the captain's chair, and he put the CD on, and they played that piece. I swear, it was like, it really was an outer-body experience. It choked me up, you know, because it was just an emotional thing. I thought, this has got to be the most outside thing that I would have ever expected.
Mark said he was inspired by, you know, the emails that you signed off with. Do you remember signing off emails like that?
Now that I think about it, I guess I commonly do it without thinking. It's a way of me of signing off and saying, you know, I'll talk to you later, with a little bit of truth in it. You know, I've got to go back. The Chisels are calling. Yeah, I can hear them calling my name. You know, time to tuck them in for the night. You know, things like that. Who would have ever thought that would end up in a song? And that's totally off the wall. But it's amazing. Totally amazing. Very unexpected.
So Mark's final guitar is the Monteleone, known as the Isabella, which was far too precious to come with us to New York. Those were Mark Knopfler's guitar stories. This journey that we've just taken from Newcastle to Robin Hood's Bay to
New York,
from the sublime to the ridiculous, from the sort of the Hofner super solid to the Monteleones, and all the bits in between.
yes.
One thing is that it's been fascinating for me, actually, even though you and I played together for many, many years. There's a lot of things I didn't know was going on. So I've learned quite a lot on this journey as well, with all the different things.
So you never stop learning about this stuff, and that's another thing. The guitar will be a friend to you all your life, you know. And I always tell kids that are starting now that it doesn't really matter what happens. So just keep playing and keep enjoying it. Music will be a friend to you all your life. John, cheers. It's been great fun. Jolly good, Tiller.
Fantastic.
Good luck, pal. Well done.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. If you wanna contact me, run me down. You gotta run me down. You gotta run me down. If you wanna contact me, run me down. Take it home now. Anybody hurt?